Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV with Bob Weeks.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and politics. We're broadcast on KGPT, channel 26.1, and its companion website, kgpt26.com. Well, this week, David Theroux stopped by the Wichita Liberty TV studios. David Theroux is founder, president, and chief executive officer of the Independent Institute and publisher of the Independent Review. The Independent Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, scholarly research and educational organization that sponsors in-depth studies of critical social and economic issues. Its mission is to boldly advance peaceful, prosperous, and free societies grounded in a commitment to human worth and dignity. His articles and reviews have also appeared in publications like the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and the Christian Science Monitor. He's appeared on ABC, MSNBC, Fox Business Network, CNN, C-SPAN, NPR, Voice of America, and many other television and radio programs and networks. A contributor to American Political Economy and Encyclopedia, he has been a director of 7 corporations and 4 foundations. So let's watch my interview with David Theroux.
Well, David Theroux, welcome to Wichita Liberty TV, and thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
You know, earlier this summer, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, a very prominent politician, maybe our president someday, who knows, he said, as a former prosecutor who was appointed by President George W. Bush on September 10th, 2001, I just want us to be really cautious because this strain of libertarianism that's going through both parties right now and making big headlines, I think, is a very dangerous thought. As the founder of a think tank noted for promoting libertarian ideas, is libertarian dangerous? What do libertarians believe in, after all?
Well, at the Independent Institute, we look into all types of issues. And the libertarian view is essentially the natural law tradition view of America's founders, which is to say that each individual has an unalienable right to liberty, to pursue their life peacefully, to make the most they can out of their lives and work with others in cooperative ways. So the idea of liberty is, and libertarian ideas, is that people should be safe from being aggressed upon by other people. And that boils down to the idea that murder, theft, fraud, and rape should be prohibited, and there should be a universal rule of law to protect people from such attacks. The difference with libertarian perspectives is that libertarians apply that to all people in society, not just to private citizens, but to government officials.
To government as well, yeah.
Right, that's right. And so that's where the controversies come in.
So what do you think, I mean, I know you can't speak for Chris Christie, but why would he and others think that these types of ideas, which seem so common sense to me, why would they think that they're dangerous? Do you know?
I think he would view them as dangerous because it undermines the sovereignty of him as governor, or president, or district attorney, or anything else. In other words, if people realize that they have rights that exist with or without government's approval, then that throws a lot of things into turmoil as far as people's willingness to comply with government orders. In other words, if the idea, going back to Jefferson and John Locke and Aquinas and others, is that there's a natural order that exists of liberty and justice and the rule of law, then government should be held accountable to that standard. And if it oversteps that standard, the people have the right to say no. And if the government keeps on doing it, they have the right to resist and to replace the government, if necessary, with institutions that will protect people's rights. So the whole idea is to establish institutions that protect liberty and essentially seek justice for people.
Now, I think right now, as we record this, we're starting to see the full Obamacare national health care plan come out, and its promoters say, well, this is going to give you the liberty to be healthful and be free, and it's going to prevent you from the freedom to die early or something like that. Is that a proper argument to make?
I think it's a pretty weak argument. I mean, people are already seeing with the healthcare.gov website, they're not even delivering on being able to register for the system. The problem is that it's not just that there's a natural order of morality as far as liberty is concerned. But there's actually simultaneously a natural order of economic principles that is the same system. And that if you break these sort of natural law codes, you end up with creating problems for people. The natural law position says that individuals have rights, that the end doesn't justify the means, that means that are used that break the natural law are not appropriate, and that there are consequences to the acts that you take. So in the case of Obamacare is forcing people not just to buy health care, but to essentially comply with all sorts of other measures. The government takes over all the records of people's health care and finance and many other things. It's a top-down system, very, very much in the progressive tradition, the sort of progressive, i.e. authoritarian tradition of government, a government elite determining what people should do and choose and how they should live. And we know empirically that that is a huge mistake, and we know morally that it is really unconscionable.
And I think we're starting to see with this Obamacare now that his promise that if you like your doctor, you can keep it. If you like your health plan, you can keep it. I'm starting to see people use the word, that was just a political promise.
A political lie is the term they use.
So what does that do to our trust in government and believing the willingness to put even more things in control of government?
Yeah, I think that what's coming out now, of course, is the fact that they deliberately did lie. And people knew it, and many people in the media have admitted that they thought that was true. And many members of Congress are now coming out and saying, we knew that it was a lie, but we felt it was what was necessary. But that's a record. And so the problem here is that if you are in business and you advertise or you make a contract with someone based on information that is not true, and that you will not comply with the agreement, that's fraud. But when the government does it, it's somehow enlightened and progressive. And so when people see that, their innate sense of fairness is obviously threatened. And I think that I think the cat is out of the bag, and it's going to continue to resonate, that people are going to get more and more delusioned from believing what government says, and hence the trend, as you were saying, towards libertarian ideas and the concern that Chris Christie has. I mean, Chris Christie wants to mandate certain things in New Jersey, which he does, or on the national level. It's going to be hard if people say, no, I'm not going to go along with it.
We'll be back in Wichita Liberty TV in just a moment. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, and with me this week is David Theroux of the Independent Institute. You know, David, here in Wichita, we're undergoing this sustainability planning effort that's been going on for a while. We sent out a survey not long ago, the city did, asking to gather citizen input. And they asked, do you agree or not agree with some statements such as, I am willing to put community interests above personal interests. It seems to me that whoever made that survey thinks that those two things are at loggerheads with each other. They're opposites. Is that the case or not?
Well, what they're doing is they're confusing community with government. And the government, allegedly, to the progressive and others, represents community, and it doesn't. And if it did, it wouldn't have to enforce measures with police powers. The community is basically people in a cooperative manner working together through private businesses and voluntary organizations of all sorts, which create civil society and institutions that are created in that civil society. And the claim that all rulers it has been over time is that they represent the people. L'état et moi. And that's a great illusion to believe that somehow the government is us. It is not us.
Well, our mayor and I think some other city council members will say, well, Bob, we had this election, and this is what happened in that election, and this is what the people have told us they want.
Well, if those people who elect those people want those things, they should be free to have them. The people who did not choose them should not have to support them or go along with them. And that's the difference. In other words, the idea that might makes right, or the majority sets the standards for everyone else, or a minority sets the standards, is a fallacy. The idea is individuals have rights regardless of what the majority or the minority or what the king says. And that's the libertarian critique.
It's very interesting. So community interests and personal interests, why do we think that they're opposite of each other? People say certain public officials are altruistic, and
Sure.
they get that type of philosophy. Is there
Well, you can be
anything wrong
very
with that?
altruistic with other people's money.
Yeah, other people's money.
And that's the nature of it, but not with your own money. And you see that all the time. I mean, most public officials are known to feather their nest, to have special policies that exempt them from the same measures that affect most people. We see that in Congress. We see that on the local level with government unions and pensions and many other things that exist. But if you want to have a society which is equitable and is just and is community-oriented, what you want is one in which people are free to connect with others, to build community enterprises, and to advance community interests.
And unfortunately,
that goes back to what was said in this recent book called Willard Garvey and Epic Life, and that Willard, being from Wichita, his entire thrust was to create communities that were thriving in neighborhoods and the city at large, and to minimize the effect of City Hall, which was basically intervening in the normal harmony of these communities. And not to say that there are not good and well-intentioned people who are behind those measures, there certainly are. But there is a great deal of folly that exists in believing that somehow government bureaucracy has the information necessary to make things work better and more harmonious.
yeah, I know that Frederick Hayek has wrote about that, the conceit of knowledge and things like that.
Fatal conceit.
Well, how did we ever get down that path that that we start to look to government for every solution? Do you know how we got that way?
Well, I think the sort of the philosophical tradition that the founders had, this natural law tradition that is articulated in the Declaration of Independence and so forth, was pushed aside in the 1900s with the rise of a utilitarian view. In other words, the view is that there aren't natural rights. There's no natural law. It's really the end justifies the means.
So government can engineer some sort of, like you mentioned, utilitarian, some sort of calculation that if we do this, the overall welfare of the state is going to be better.
Right. It's a fallacy of so-called modernity, of the so-called Enlightenment period, that some elite, which is really, really smart, somehow can manage society, and that us Neanderthals just don't know what we're doing. And that's what Hayek addresses, and that's what many other scholars have addressed, and it's just poppycock. It is the fatal conceit, and it's led to many, many problems in as far as war and peace, as far as welfare, as far as housing and healthcare, and Obamacare is just the latest example of this folly.
And we do see, everybody's focused on that website and the failure of Kathleen Sebelius or somebody to make sure that's working. But really, that is just the starting point.
She won't even be held accountable, right? So if she was running Amazon or she was running the local barbershop, she would be held accountable.
Yeah.
Right. But she is in a position in which she doesn't have to be.
And so often I think our leaders, they just don't get it. Like the president said, when the iPhone came out, they had a little glitch there, but we didn't. But iPhones are not even the majority of telephones. I think that the Google Android system is, so they have competitors.
They have competitors, but also, in the iPhone example, if you have a problem, there are places that you can go to, and they will come to your house, or they'll do lots of things to essentially provide customer service. But you're not going to get that from Obamacare. You're going to be a subject, right? The meaning of patient becomes pretty clear. You have to be immensely patient because you're going to have these imposition of controls and mandates on you, and either you accept it or else, right? Either that or the IRS comes down, and it's a felony, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not the basis of a free society. That's really the basis of an authoritarian society.
And besides freedom, sometimes these things just don't work out economically, because I think now with the difficulties of getting enrolled in Obamacare, that means that the people who really need that health care because they have pre-existing conditions, they're very highly motivated to get in the system. And the other people that we need to pay the premiums, may not be so. And so I think they call that the death spiral.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's John Goodman's, one of our senior fellows, calls it the death spiral. And the system is set up, essentially, it's not an insurance system. You can basically get coverage, you can get health care when you're diagnosed with a terminal illness at that moment, right? So you have no incentive to take care of yourself. Why take care of yourself? Because you'll get the coverage anyway.
Yeah.
But if you have a situation in which people are incented to care about what they eat and to exercise and to sleep and and so on and so forth, have a positive outlook on life, it makes a huge difference as science has shown. And the issue of pre-existing condition, why should it be that it's not legal for someone to have their own health savings account they could take from job to job or to a different state?
Right.
Why is it that you can only buy health insurance from a company based in your own state? And the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And so the problem of healthcare is not just Obamacare, which is the new layer of foolishness. It's that there is this multiplicity, this Byzantine system of contradictory policies that's built up over many years.
And
that
all
people
the state regulations.
the state, federal, and the rest of it,
And we
including
do have-
Medicare and so on and so forth.
We do have a clinic here in Wichita where it's called Atlas MD. And the word Atlas comes, I mean, they are libertarian. They chose that word explicitly for that. But it's just like $50 a month. You come in as much as you want. They don't take the insurance, and they're working outside the system, but they face, I think, a lot of resistance.
Yes, that's right. Well, why is it so difficult to understand that people do want health care? They do want to not be subject to arbitrary controls. Obama knew that. Obama said that, of course, you're not going to lose your doctor. You can keep the health care plan that you have. Blankety blank, and they were all lies, because you can't keep those things. And so that's part of what people have to come to grips with. They have to realize either they want to have a system that they personally can have control over, that will be responsive, or they're going to be subject to controls that they're not going to have response into.
Very good. Well, let's take another moment off for a commercial break. We'll be back with Wichita Liberty TV in just a moment. Well, welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, and with me this week is David Theroux, president of the Independent Institute in Oakland, California. With this rollout of Obamacare maybe not going real smoothly, I see people saying, these would be Democrats mostly, well, Medicare had a rocky start, Social Security had a rocky start, and people love these successful programs. So are these two programs really successful, and what have they done to our country that is, I think, bad in some ways?
Well, they've essentially set up the current system. The reason why healthcare is so expensive, the reason why you don't have a system that will be attended to the problem of pre-existing conditions or portability and lack of innovation and escalating healthcare costs for insurance policies is because of these other measures that exist. It's a fog that's been created that people don't know what the price of a hospital stay is. They don't know what the cost of an inoculation. A doctor doesn't even know. And so you have that fundamental generation of the current health system, plus the fact that Medicare and Social Security are not sustainable. The debt that continues to mount is unsustainable and cannot endure. And so the solution is to privatize these different accounts and enable people to make their own choices so that those who are most disadvantaged don't have to pay these high prices that they're currently faced or being priced out, so they can only go to an emergency room, and so that charitable organizations can lend a helping hand to people really in need and not be thrown into some government mess, basically.
So there you mentioned in the same sentence charitable organizations and government.
Yeah.
What's the fundamental difference between the two, would you say?
Well, the difference should be that a charity is one in which people are acting altruistically. They're acting because they care about the situation of their neighbor or the person across the world. They feel that they are blessed with good health or wealth or whatever, and they want to extend that to other people. They want to share that with other people. And to do that, they raise the funds on their own, or they contribute themselves. They work and they combine with other people to create organizations that themselves become firms, nonprofit firms, whether it's the Salvation Army, or whether it's Catholic Charities, or whether it's a group that is creating potable water in Kenya, or in all sorts of things here in Wichita. The government essentially is an organization that is guaranteed its revenues regardless of how it performs. If it messes up, the argument usually is, well, we need more money. It didn't work, hence we need more money, we need more controls. And that's not exactly a very good indication of satisfying consumers. Let the public really choose whether you want that measure, whether you want that program. Don't just force them to fund it, even if they don't want it.
And I think kind of related to that, we had an editorial last month in the Wichita Eagle criticizing libertarianism. It says, radical libertarianism assumes that humans are wired only to be selfish, when in fact cooperation is the height of human evolution. So
I think cooperation is the height. And that the irony is that a police force, Wichita has its own SWAT team, right? That is not the basis of charity. Charity is love. It is other-directedness. It's giving to other people, sharing and trying to uplift the lives of other people. And that is the natural instinct. Adam Smith talked about this. Many people talked about this throughout history. Most religions encourage this. And just from the common sense, as Thomas Aquinas talked about, people had a common sense to care about one another. And if you mandate those things, then why should people care? And it makes it more difficult for them to care. So the kind of charity, for example, that Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about in his book Democracy in America, when he first came to America in the early 1900s, he actually came to investigate the prison system of America, and he discovered to his surprise that America had this thriving system of spontaneous organizations that would be created on the community level to deal with every kind of concern and problem that might exist.
These are these beneficial societies?
Mutual aid societies, right, and all different kinds of other kinds of organizations. In France, on the other hand, which is where he was from, the king had to approve every kind of organization that could exist. It was a system of mercantilism where you'd have the royal carpenter and the royal whatever. And so you didn't have this vibrance, you didn't have this dynamism, so to speak, of adjusting to the needs that people have.
Here in Wichita, we're always concerned about economic development. We've had some setbacks here, like the loss of Boeing last year, I think it was, and some things like that. So I testify at the city council, and I say, we really ought to reduce taxes, reduce spending, let entrepreneurship flourish. And people say, Bob, you just don't want people to have any jobs. Can you stick up for me a little bit there?
Well, the creation of jobs comes primarily from small business entrepreneurship. It doesn't come from some central plan. The problem with government planning is that the commission or board or bureau doesn't have the information to know what should be done and to adjust the situations because it simply doesn't have the information.
But they act as though they do, really.
They don't have the market test. They can't adapt. And they have incentives to feather their nest to preserve their situation and to resist change. An entrepreneur in a competitive market has to adjust to consumer preferences, has to adjust to competitive pressures and looking at innovation, and has to be able to do that to succeed. And there's a learning process of the entrepreneur, of this so-called creative destruction, that you are able to learn how to better provide and serve customers and to adapt to new opportunities. And that's the nature of a free society. That's why free societies have always been the most productive societies, have the highest standard of living, and consistently where you have government measures, even ones that are exclusively devoted to the poor, it basically ends up impoverishing people and keeping a sort of a permanent poverty class that is not able to uplift themselves because they're sort of locked into this bureaucratic stranglehold.
And I think we see that despite 40 or some years of the war on poverty and many trillions of dollars spent, the poverty rate, I think, stays the same.
Right, and this is not an issue of people I mean, there's an old saying that one economist came up with to explain the basis of all government policies. It's called the Baptist Bootlegger Alliance. It's nothing to say negative about Baptists per se. It's just to say that all government measures consist of well-intentioned people who want to do good and interest groups who want to line their pockets by using government power against their competitors and getting subsidies, using price controls or whatever, okay? And this is true not just prohibition, which is where the idea of the Bootlegger Baptist Alliance, the prohibitionists wanted to protect women from being abused by drunken husbands and all the rest of it. The bootlegger, on the other hand, was benefiting from the high price that you could charge and the poor quality and not having to be accountable to consumers and the law. And every government measure is like that. And you have to be able to sort of see through it. There is the reality of intention, but there's the seen and the unseen consequences to things. And it's the unseen consequence that is often what really kicks you in the butt, because you're not aware of what could happen.
Yeah, I think our viewers, they know that seen and unseen because we've been working through week by week a chapter from Henry Hazlitt's famous book, Economics in One Lesson, where that's really what he talks about a lot.
Yeah, he got that from an economist by the name of Frederick Bastiat.
And we know him too. Matter of fact, some of our quotes in between our commercials come from Frederick Bastiat as well. Well, David Theroux, thank you very much for coming by. I think we're out of time for today. This is Wichita Liberty TV. We'll see you again next week.